I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we conclude our investigation into the mysterious disappearance of Brandon Lawson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my mysterious co-host, Alice. Hello, Alice.
Hi, Brett. Mysterious. I guess that goes well with our theme today of how incredibly mysterious this case is.
There you go.
But I hope by the end of this episode, we'll have demystified it. Some say demystify, and as we've said before, others say that we just pour cold water onto very mysterious stories.
Yeah, this is definitely one you can think about a lot. You can get lost in that 911 call if you let yourself. It's not hard to do. It's very mysterious. Everybody knows that. But I think at the end of the day, if you want to solve this case, or if you want to at least approach some kind of truth here, it's not that call you need to focus on. As interesting as that call is, it's the calls that happened afterwards. It's the calls between Brandon and his brother.
So it comes down to the calls that Kyle had with Brandon that night. As you'll see, it's a little bit confusing. So here's the rundown. Let's just cut to the chase. Brandon tells Kyle that Ledessa got some, quote, Mexicans from the neighborhood to chase Brandon out of town, and there are two of them still chasing him, but a state trooper pulled over the third one. Brandon then hangs up with Kyle and calls him back a few minutes later to tell him that he ran out of gas, and he asks Kyle to bring him some gas. So Kyle lets him know that he'll have to stop back at their house to get some gas cans, and Kyle also needs his check from work to clear so he can get cash to buy the gas in the first place. I just like to note here, though, that if your first call is that someone's chasing you or giving chase and the cops are involved somehow, but then the next call there's absolutely no mention of it, is strange.
Yeah, Brandon's all over the place. I mean, he really is.
Okay, he calls, he needs gas. Then Brandon calls back several times, but he can't really be understood, except for the call where he tells Kyle and Audrey that they need to hurry because he's bleeding. So now I imagine out here, there are cell phone pings from his phone here, but really when you're outside of the town of anywhere in Texas, you're pretty much in the great vast home on the range. I imagine cell phone service is just spotty out here. So I don't find it surprising that it's difficult to understand him, except that we'll go back to that 911 call. He is a little bit difficult to understand, and I don't just think it's because of spotty service. What do you think, Brett?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it could be spotty service. It could be, there's a lot of things that could be going on here. If he's bleeding, now he says he's bleeding, but what does that mean, right? He fell and he cut his hand and he's bleeding. He's been shot. He's been stabbed. He's been gored by a wild pig. Hard to say, right? If he really were bleeding and bleeding seriously, that could have a lot to do with the fact that he's unintelligible. Also, the fact that he's on meth or has been on meth recently and maybe on meth that night might have something to do with it. His 911 call is unintelligible. It's not, breaking up. It's not coming in and out, but you can't understand what he's talking about for whatever reason. So I don't know exactly what it means that he can't be understood. I've kind of heard different things on this, but either way, all they know is he wants him to get there and he's bleeding.
And, we've said Kyle and Audrey really do. They get in the car and they head out to where Brandon is pretty much immediately. They get to the now abandoned truck and they see Brandon's truck and they ask him where he is on the phone. And Brandon says he's right there, but neither Audrey nor Kyle can see him. Now, maybe he's near the truck. Maybe he's hiding behind some brush. That's possible, but it is a big, vast land out there. But if you can see someone and you're talking to them on the phone, I just feel like you'd be able to hear them or hear their voice reverberating.
I wonder what he meant here, because once again, it's very dark and it's in the middle of nowhere. So you could imagine Brandon being a good distance away, seeing their headlights arriving at his truck. They call him and he says, "Yeah, I can see you." And what he's saying is, I can see the lights from your truck in the distance, right? Like, I could imagine that's what he means.
And I think that's probably more likely as to what happened. A vehicle approaches, and this time, Brandon says to Kyle, "One time, run." Now, one time means the cops. So he's telling Kyle, the cops are here, run. Now, this is particularly interesting because, remember, before Brandon says one time, he had actually called 911 and he had asked specifically for the cops. When asked if he needed an ambulance, he said, "No, the cops." So he had requested cops. But when cops show up, he says, "One time, run."
Yeah. I mean, I think this is actually a really important point in this case, because I think a lot of people listen to that 911 call and they just assume that something rational is going on. I think we see this in other cases. We saw this in Elisa Lam, going all the way back to our first case that we covered, where I think you have to put yourself in the mindset of the person involved in these situations. And obviously something's off with Brandon, because like you said, he's literally just called 911 and specifically said that he wants the cops to come. And yet now he's telling Kyle, the cops are showing up, run. For all Brandon knows, those are the cops he just called. He just called 911 and wanted the cops, and now here are the cops. And Kyle tells him, "I'm not running. I haven't done anything wrong." At which point Brandon says to him, "Where's your pride, MFer?" and then hangs up on him. I mean, and Kyle's talked about this, how that was very much, that his brother was always good to him and didn't normally say things like that to him. But at that point, he's just saying, like, why are you having anything to do with the police? The police are the enemy or whatever. But which just goes back to the fact, once again, Brandon has just called the police. And if Brandon were in a circumstance where, the Mexicans had called up to him and shot him or whatever, or stabbed him, or were chasing him in the field at that time, why would he do this? If he were in his right mind when he made that 911 call, why would he not react joyfully at this point? The thing he has asked for has come. This is not a tragedy where Brandon called for help, and if he had just told him where he was, help would have arrived and he would have been saved. The police showed up. They showed up. And now at this point, he's telling Kyle to run.
And you're right. People point to, well, he had an arrest warrant, so he was afraid. But kind of, you got to weigh your options here. You have an arrest warrant, but if in fact you're being chased by 3 people and one of them may be shooting at you, maybe you're bleeding because you've been hurt in this chase, run to the cops.
Exactly. And obviously Brandon had made that calculus at some point. At some point he had made the decision, whatever the downside is of having an interaction with the police, I'm fine with it. Because he called 911 and he asked for the police. It just, to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. At this point, Kyle, who said, "Look, I'm not running from the cops," he actually approaches the officer. They talk about this for a little while. He says, "This is my brother's truck and he ran out of gas." He asks if he can search down the road for Brandon. He says he keeps losing his signal and he can't find him. Obviously, that's not true. He's just trying to protect his brother from the police officer. Police officer says, "Sure, but I just came from that way, so you're not going to see him that way." Later on, he's going to learn that Brandon called 911 in between the time when he called Kyle to ask for gas, and then he called him and did the whole, where's your pride thing. Kyle has no idea. Kyle has said this. He has no idea why Brandon would have done the things he did and say the things he said, given the fact that he has just called the police. That is one of those things. Kyle knew his brother better than anybody, and this is one of those things that's just completely inexplicable, even for him. He cannot figure out why Brandon would do this. In any event, Kyle, he's kind of driven up and down the road, seeing if he can find Brandon. Can't find him. Like Alice said, he's got his son with him. His son's hungry. It's late. Eventually, Kyle goes to a bank. His check's finally cleared. He gets some money. He gets some food for his son. He fills up a gas can with 5 gallons of gas. Later on, he's going to pick up a friend. They're going to go back to Brandon's truck, leave the gas there. Kyle actually yells out at this point because he can't get in touch with Brandon on his phone anymore. There's no cops anymore, and we filled your car with gas. You can come out now. Hoping he'll come out. He doesn't. They go up and down the road, yelling out his name, but they can't find him, and eventually they go home. And by 9 a.m. of that day, you have Ledessa filing a missing persons report. Now, once again, we've talked about this before. Searches, how accurate can searches be? You sort of have Amy Bechtel. We talked about Amy Bechtel. Everybody in the world searched for Amy Bechtel. It was one of the biggest searches ever, with some of the best searchers ever. And even though they had a vast area to cover, you kind of feel like if anybody was going to find her, they would find her. Maura Murray, we talked about that before. There's conflicting reports on how extensive the search was. Some people say it was very extensive, so extensive that there's no way that she walked off into the woods. Therefore, she must have been caught by somebody and killed. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. In this case, I think what we can say, the area, Alice has talked about this. This is a vast area of wilderness. A lot of it is private property. A lot of those private property owners have never really allowed searches of their property. And the sheriff fully supports them in that. The sheriff does not like the family. There's a lot of bad blood there. So I think one thing we can say, something that adds to the mystery of this and makes it difficult to solve, there's a lot of land out there where Brandon might have been and might be that's never been searched.
And, not just it hasn't been searched, but a lot of it would be difficult to search. This is probably a lot of ranch land, and so you have really thick, overgrown brush that probably has a lot of thorns. There's probably a lot of wildlife in it. It's so thick that it's difficult to see even a few inches in, whether there are leaves or whatnot on there or not. It's just such thick brush that's where a lot of your animals hide because it's that thick. They don't have to be very far in to be hidden from view. So a lot of it's just difficult to cut through. You basically have to cut through with like a chainsaw the brush to really be able to see what's underneath.
Yeah, and you talk about a place where the animals might get to a body. You got all those wild hogs that Texas is famous for. So I don't know. It's a pretty rough terrain if you were going to try and conduct a search.
Right. There's some talk about, during the search, I think the next day they had deployed helicopters with heat sensors. The problem there is, and nothing was detected by the heat sensors. A heat sensor picks up on body heat, and so if there's a body out there, it would pick up a mass of heat. The problem is, if the body's not warm, if the body's not alive, you're not going to get picked up by heat sensors.
Same thing with dogs. They had some dogs out there searching, but the problem is, the one thing that really messes up dogs are pigs. And there's a lot of pigs out there, so it's not even clear that the dogs would have been able to find Brandon, even if he were there.
Why did pigs mess up dogs? Do you know? This is totally a tangent, but why?
I don't. Pigs and people are not that different. I don't know why. If you look at forensic scientists and how they test everything, they always use pig carcasses in places of humans because they're so similar. So I think there's just something about pigs that it messes up dogs. I don't I mean, I'm no dog scientist. I can't say for sure, but that's something I've read many different times that is something that can mess with dogs.
Good to know. So,
Yeah, there you go.
what are some prosecutor angles, Brett? Is there anything here?
I don't really think so. I mean, this obviously has never been a case that's been litigated to any level and probably never will be. I mean, I'll say this: if you have a warrant out, don't die to avoid your warrant. That'll be my one piece of prosecutorial advice. Just go ahead and go along with the place. It'll be okay. It's better than being lost in the Texas wilderness.
I agree. And I do have to say there was 15 minutes between the time he supposedly broke down and called 911. Sitting in the pitch black on the side of the road for 15 minutes in Texas, or really anywhere on a country road, really does seem like forever. So even though this happened in a short amount of time, I can imagine if you are starting to panic in those 15 minutes, you could start to create a lot of scenarios in your head about worst case scenarios.
Yeah, especially if you thought the Mexicans were coming for you.
So then what are some theories about what happened? I mean, we started touching on some of them. Brandon mentioned that Mexicans from the neighborhood were chasing him at Ledessa's behest. Now, could this be true? So Ledessa and Brandon had been together for, I think, over a decade. They'd been like high school sweethearts. They had children together. They had a heated relationship, as you can see from this fight the night he disappeared. But other than Brandon's assertion, this kind of one sentence on a call with Kyle, there is no evidence that anyone was out to get him. And his brother has even said that there were no Mexicans in the neighborhood, at least that Brandon knew of. So, I mean, there is absolutely no corroboration that Ledessa was trying to get people to hunt him down, that there were people chasing him. And it kind of contradicts the fact that pretty soon after Brandon had left, Ledessa was probably still mad, but she wasn't so mad that she didn't care about him. She called him and tried to talk him out of making this long drive and instead to come home or to go to Kyle's house. So it just, of course, we're having to take Ledessa's word for it as to what was spoken about, but at least the call records show that they did speak, and she had initiated the call soon after he left.
Yeah, I think the whole Mexicans in the neighborhood thing is important, but not because they were actually Mexicans from the neighborhood who were, trying to hurt him or trying to track him down or working at Ledessa's, behest or anything. I don't think that's a likely scenario. One thing people have speculated, and I think even Kyle has mentioned, is the river. So if you look at where his car was found, it is essentially just south of a town called Bronte, so Bronte, Texas. And Bronte is just north of the Colorado River. So there is a bridge that goes over the Colorado River, very close to where Brandon's truck was found. So if you listen to the call, particularly at the end of the call, there is what sounds like if you've ever driven across a bridge, they're the joints in the bridge where the two sections of the concrete parts of the bridge are connected. When your car goes over it, it makes like a badonk song, right? Or sound every time you go over. So it's like badonk, 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 right? So if you listen to the end of the call, you sort of hear that. And so Kyle has speculated that by the time he makes that 911 call, he is actually very close to that bridge, and he is close to the Colorado River, and that you're hearing the sound of cars go over the bridge. If that's true, then one possibility is that Brandon accidentally stumbled into the river, fell into the river, and that's the reason he's never been found, is because his body was swept away. We've talked about this with other missing persons cases. Every missing persons case you will ever do always ends in water at some point, because people think, what better way to get rid of a body? Most people who end up in water resurface at some point. It's not actually as good a way to get rid of a body as you might think. But nevertheless, it is a viable sort of theory about one possibility about what happened to Brandon.
And again, Brett, I didn't hear anything in that 911 call that would have sounded like cars going over a bridge.
You have to be pretty creative with your hearing to hear it. I've tried to hear the gunshots and I've tried to hear the talking and I just don't hear it. I can hear this if I think about it enough. At the very end, after he says, I need the cops, and he doesn't say anything else, there are moments of silence where I can sort of hear this. So maybe that's what he's, maybe, but honestly, it could be so many things other than that. So I don't know.
Yeah, another theory is that maybe this was a bad case of road rage. Brandon was hyped up that night. He had been in a bad fight with Ladessa. He was so angry he was going to leave in the middle of the night, drive all night to go to his dad's house. And he was probably not cooled down driving, and maybe he ran into another car that was doing something that just kind of made him mad, or someone else was aggressive on the road and he just didn't take lightly to it. Maybe they were riding up on his tail, or vice versa, he was riding up on their tail. In that 911 call, he does mention they were both going towards Abilene. Maybe two cars were going in the direction of Abilene. He got in some sort of road rage fight with another car, and maybe that's why his truck is pulled off so poorly. Maybe he didn't actually run out of gas in that position, but was rather either trying to get away from the other car, or he pulled his car off to bow up and kind of challenge someone to a fight outside of the car, kind of like a throw your car to the side and say, be a man, come fight me sort of thing. Maybe there's something to him thinking that someone's chasing him, because maybe he's paranoid. Maybe when someone's just riding on his tail, he thinks it's someone chasing him, and so he's ready to fight. He bows up. He pulls his car off shoddily to the side. It's not even completely pulled off. And maybe he gets punched. Maybe that's why he's bleeding. This is complete speculation, but it's possible that he misdirects his anger that's already seething, from his fight with Ladessa, and takes it out on someone else that causes not necessarily a crime, but he picks a fight with someone, and maybe something horrible happens from that. Or he just really pisses someone off, and that guy's like, forget you, rides off. Because remember, the trucker reports the car, Brandon's car, but he doesn't see anyone else around. If it were road rage, maybe it was mostly just on Brandon's part, and he was just mad. He just wanted to pick a fight, and no one was going to pick a fight with him at midnight in the middle of nowhere.
I mean, look, Brandon ended up in the field for a reason. We don't know what that reason is, but if you assume it's not just pure insanity or drug-induced psychosis, which we're going to talk about next, this actually makes a lot of sense. If you just look at the phone call, skip the parts that are less intelligible, we're out here going towards Abilene on both sides. Imagine two cars, both driving towards Abilene, like Alice said. Maybe one of them pulls up next to him, and they're sort of speeding along the road because he doesn't want to let the other guy pass, or the other guy doesn't want to let him pass, and they're kind of in this sort of road rage incident. If that were true, they would both be going towards Abilene on both sides of the road because both of them are heading that direction. He then says, the guy chased me into the woods. Please hurry. I tried, or there'll be no talking to him. I accidentally ran into them, right? Something about the first guy. I need the cops. I mean, all this fits with him getting into this situation where he's in this sort of road ragey incident. He's already paranoid. Like Alice said, maybe he realizes he's running out of gas, so he throws his car over to the side. He jumps out. Maybe they get into a fight. Maybe he thinks it's worse than it is. Maybe they don't get into a fight. Maybe the guy just pulls up behind him and jumps out and is like, man, what are you doing? And he thinks this guy's a threat, and he runs off into the field. And now he's running from this mysterious attacker who's not even attacking him, who's not even there, who's like standing next to their car thinking, who is this crazy guy running through the field? And then that guy just gets back in his car and drives on and never thinks about it again. Meanwhile, he's running crazy in the middle of nowhere, calling 911 about this mysterious attacker who's not even there. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It fits a lot of the elements we've talked about in this case.
I mean, that at least tries to get him, a sane-ish reason for why he's in the field. Because you're right, Brett. When you run out of gas, you stay with your car, or you start walking towards a gas station. You don't go into the
Yeah,
field.
you don't run into a field.
There's no gas in the field.
Yeah. And I think if you add sort of this road rage thing to the possibility that he is suffering some sort of drug-induced psychosis, it fits even better. Now, look, Brandon had not smoked meth for about 6 months, so it had been a while. His tolerance was lower than it usually was. He was starting this new job. He'd just taken a drug test, so he decided this is as good a time as any to get high. There's a couple things that could be going on here. Number one, he could have smoked more meth, or the same amount of meth that he normally smoked, but it had been 6 months and it hit him harder. The other possibility, which with meth is very possible, is that it was cut with something that he had never had before that caused him to have some sort of psychotic reaction, to hallucinate. He obviously was angry already. He appears to be paranoid. All of this, to me, fits with someone who probably was under the influence of meth at the time. Now, we know he was smoking meth because he had actually asked his brother to get it for him. His brother was the one who bought it for him. And his brother has said, there's no speculation for me, he was under the influence of drugs at the time. So, whatever happened that night, drugs had something to do with it, whether you think he was actually hallucinating or not.
Right, and that kind of leads to another theory, which is that maybe this was a drug deal gone wrong. Maybe, he was angry and he wanted to buy more meth, and so he was heading out there, and on his way to his dad's house, he was going to meet someone and buy more meth, but the deal went bad. But kind of like Brett just said, we know that when he wanted meth, it seemed that he would call Kyle about it. Kyle's the one who would get him meth. So he didn't need to venture out into the middle of nowhere, meet someone, put himself in that danger to get the meth. He could get his meth from Kyle. So, I mean, if you read all the other things, the Mexicans are chasing me, I'm bleeding, there's a state trooper, he pulled over one person. You can see how a story can be written about, oh, this is some drug deal gone wrong. He stumbled into something he shouldn't have seen, and that's why they're coming after him. He saw some big drug deal go down that he shouldn't have seen. I just don't think that's the case. There's unlikely to be anyone out there. That's probably not where you meet someone. It really is just the middle of nowhere. Drug sales typically happen where there are customers, and a lot of the drug dealers that we arrest are sitting in parking lots. They're sitting at gas stations. They're sitting where other people will drive by because you need volume to be profitable. You probably are not meeting people in the middle of nowhere in a field to do a meth deal.
It's one of those things where it's too out in the middle of nowhere for your average drug deal to be going down. And it's not enough in the middle of nowhere, for like some big cartel to be dropping off 10 tons of methamphetamine. This is a road that, while it is very rural, is still traveled. There were trucks going up and down this road. There was one of them that saw Brandon's truck. So it's not out in the middle of nowhere enough that you would think that some plane full of methamphetamine was landing there and that his car happened to break down right there where there was this huge drug deal going down. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense with anything that we know that happened that night. So while that is a sexy theory, the whole Brandon stumbled upon something he shouldn't see, I just don't think there's a lot there to support it.
So we've shot down all the fun theories, Brett. You sounded pretty sure at the beginning that this was easily explainable. So what do you think happened?
Well, I don't think we're ever going to know exactly what happened because we weren't there. And I think it is very clear that, unfortunately, Brandon's no longer with us. So we're not going to know exactly what happened. But I think based on the timeline and based on what we know, we can develop a pretty good theory about what happened that night. And I think it starts with the fact that Brandon was high on drugs. He was doing meth. He'd been doing meth probably for the past 24 hours or so at this point. He's high on drugs. He's also just been in a fight with his wife, Ladessa. He's angry. He's so angry that he's going to drive all the way to his father's house in the middle of the night. He's not going to get there until like 4 o'clock in the morning. And he's going to do it on a half tank well, a half tank, that's generous, on barely any gasoline. And he doesn't even stop to buy gas, and he had money to buy it. So he's angry, he's high, he's not thinking clearly. This is a perfect combination for something terrible to happen. Now, look, we talked about these Mexicans a lot. It's possible he had gotten in with some sort of Mexican drug cartel. The fact of the matter is that most of the meth sold in the U.S. these days is produced by Mexican super labs, so it's not outside the realm of possibility. But we know, as Alice said, that he had gotten his methamphetamine from his brother. So the chances that he was actually involved with Mexicans or that they were chasing him or whatever are slim to none. But whether the Mexicans were real or whether they were imagined, he believed in that moment that they were after him. And he believed that one of the ones who was chasing him had been pulled over by a state trooper. And to me, as I said earlier, that explains the Staper line in the call. I think essentially what you have in the 911 call that's been so analyzed is a retelling of the same story to this bewildered 911 operator that he told to his brother earlier. But he's doing it so quickly that he's combining words. He's not pausing. He's not telling the story in any sort of intelligible way. But I think as he's heading out, maybe there's a car behind him. Maybe he thinks he recognizes it. Maybe he thinks that these are people that have been sent by LaDessa to chase him down. Whether true or imagined or in the middle of some sort of drug-induced haze, he believes that. One of the cars is pulled over by a state trooper. That becomes part of his fantasy. He's heading down this road. He's probably driving pretty fast. He's going towards Abilene. Either he comes up on another car or another car speeds up on him. I think, like Alice said earlier, he probably gets into some sort of road rage altercation with this person. Maybe he's roaring up on their tail. They're roaring up on his. They're doing the chicken thing where one of them swings around to pass, but the other won't let them pass. They're going towards Abilene on both sides. At some point, he decides that this is the Mexicans that are chasing him. Either way, he's honking. He's angry. Something. And the cars, they end up driving down the road. And he realizes, oh no, I'm running out of gas. And you can just imagine, he's been in the safety of his car, and all of a sudden, that safety is coming to an end. His car's about to run out of gas, and he's stopped. Realizing that, he swings his car over to the side of the road quickly in such a way that he leaves the back end hanging out. He jumps out of his truck. He does so quickly that he doesn't bother to lock the door. I think the windows are actually still down in the car. He doesn't bother to raise the windows. Both are things that his brother says are incredibly unlike him. And he runs off into that field, intending to escape his pursuers, whether they're real or imagined. So I think he's still high. I think his adrenaline is pumping. I think he's angry. His emotions are up. He's afraid. And despite that warrant that he has out for him, he calls 911, possibly while still running. At some point after the call, I think he makes his way back towards the truck. I don't know that he gets all the way there, but he can see his brother either approaching through his headlights, or maybe he can actually see his brother. But he also sees a cop. By this point, some of that excitement, some of that fear has drained away. Whoever it was isn't there any longer. And he tells his brother to run because it's a police officer. When you see a police officer, that's what you do. And when he tells his brother to run, he runs too. I think it's possible he runs back towards that bridge. I think it's possible that he falls into the river. I'm not exactly sure what happens to him at that point. I think either way, he died. I think he died of exposure. I don't think he was shot. I don't think he was murdered. I think he is out there somewhere. I think because of these property issues, hostility of local law enforcement, possibly because of the river. If he ended up there, his body has never been found. One thing I have read, I don't know if this is true, I know it's something LaDessa has said, is that the final ping from his phone was around 3 miles from where his vehicle was left, and that area has never been searched. So it's possible if that area were searched, they would find Brandon. But that's essentially what I think happened.
Yeah, I think this is all really enlightened by, I think Kyle got it right with his first phone call with Brandon when Brandon said, "The Mexicans are chasing me." And Kyle responds, "Are you tripping on drugs?" I think whatever this happened, we don't know the specifics and we won't know. I think there were drugs involved and he was paranoid or he was high and there were things happening in his mind that were not happening in reality. And it led him to do things that exposed him to, I just don't think there's foul play here. I think he thought he was running and I think he thought he was in danger, but he wasn't actually in danger. And as a result, he was running to safety and eventually found himself in a situation that he was exposed to the elements and he succumbed to that. I don't think there was foul play. I don't think there was someone hunting him. I don't think anyone killed him. I think he just had a bad paranoia about him that made him do irrational things. And I think all of the surrounding phone calls and conversations and kind of stories he tells, instead of it being this incredible kind of like blockbuster movie, it's really just a man who is suffering from paranoia and a bad high from probably smoking meth not too long before this situation.
Yeah, and it doesn't make it any less tragic. It doesn't make it any less awful for his family. I do think it's not as mysterious as a lot of people want to make it out to be. If people still think there is foul play involved, the two times I would point you to 12:54, he makes that 911 call. It lasts about a minute. 12:58, the truckers call in 911 to report his vehicle is there. There's just no way that somebody was there, that they chased him into that field and murdered him there, got back to their car and got out of the area before that truck passed his vehicle at 12:58, and the trucker didn't see anything, and his vehicle's not damaged. So there's also he didn't get in a wreck with anybody, right? There's just no actual evidence of anyone else being there, and it doesn't even seem like it's possible given the timeline. So I think Alice is right. I think this was, at the end of the day, it was all in his head. It was all in his head, and that drove him into that field, and he never left it.
While that might be unsatisfying, I think it's the most likely story here.
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunately, like a lot of the mysteries we talk about, it's the closest we're going to get. I mean, there'll be people who disagree with that, but in my view, it's the closest we're going to get. I don't think we'll ever know, and that's why this will remain, I think, one of those mysteries that people look to for a very, very long time. Well, Alice, do you have anything else you want to add on this great mystery?
Nothing else for today.
Yeah, now if you guys have anything to add, we'd love to hear your thoughts and theories. Our email address is prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all the various social media. Shout out to those of you on YouTube. Enjoy the back and forth we have on our YouTube channel. Enjoy, you guys. Thank you so much for subscribing and listening. Do want to point out, you guys, if you're interested in this, Crawlspace podcast has done some excellent shows on the disappearance of Brandon Lawson. They have an interview with his brother, which was really just a ton of information that we didn't know before and really changed the way people thought about this case and really informed what we talked about on here. So check that out. We will link that on the website, prosecutorspodcast.com. We'll also link to some great Reddit articles. There's been so much, people have pulled so much information together on this. You guys can dive as deep into this as you want to. So a couple articles from Reddit or posts from Reddit that have a lot of information running down the things that Kyle has said about this. Also great stuff on the timeline that was very helpful to us when looking at exactly what happened and when it happened. Also some articles that have been written about this case, as always. I like to put all that stuff on the website so you guys can see what we saw, the kind of information that led us to reach the conclusions we've reached, and also so you can take a deep dive if you want to. So check that out and let us know what you think. We're also on Reddit. We're also on Patreon. Thank you to all our Patreon patrons and those of you on Patreon who suggested we cover this case. We're happy to do that. And we're looking forward to hearing from you guys. Want to know what you think, what you disagree with, if we got anything wrong, if you have any extra information that we did not mention, let us know, and we will talk about it in a follow-up episode. Look, guys, you guys have been awesome, getting lots of 5-star reviews on Apple. You've been so supportive, loving your emails. Thank you so much for everything that you are doing and saying about us. It really, really warms our heart and keeps us coming back.
Yes, we love you guys. I was just so overwhelmed.
Shout out to the people.
No, I was just so overwhelmed with. I really am. Especially all you guys who are listening on YouTube. I didn't know that was a thing, so thank you. And subscribing. I think we had, hundreds of subscribers over the Delphi episodes, which was such a welcome surprise. So thank you guys for just showing us you care by reaching out, leaving comments, subscribing, downloading, 5-star reviews. Just, you guys are the best. Thank you so much. We really, we are like, giddy high schoolers texting each other whenever someone leaves a really nice comment. So thank you.
It's true. It's true. And as long as you guys are listening, we'll keep recording. So it's a symbiotic relationship. Well, Alice, I think that's all we've got for this week. We'll be back next week with a new case, new questions, and hopefully some new answers. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
Popping a cold one, and by cold one I mean a LaCroix.
I have a bubbly sparkling water.
But I really like bubbly.
I do too. I think bubbly is it's more carbonated than LaCroix, I think.
Hence the name.
Yeah, it has like a bite. I like it.
Yeah, it hurts. It hurts your nostrils a little bit.
Exactly.
And it's great.
I want pain in my water.
Yeah, I want pain in my water. You want your water hard.
I want to drink
it's not
water.
alcohol,
hard
but it's
water.
close.
I mean, I also have a glass of bourbon, so I got them both. On both sides.
Interesting. Sparkling bourbon. Since we're talking about sparkling water, I really like Waterloo.
I've had Waterloo. I think at your house is where I had that.
Probably. We don't have a wine collection, but we have a sparkling water collection.
Sparkling water collection.
It's a much cheaper collection.